You're watching The Game Masters, how they rose from nothing to control the rules of the world, the brutal, secret, and often dark journeys of those who built empires from absolutely nothing. The enigma of Estée Lauder, the woman who turned dreams into an empire. She was born Josephine Esther Menzer, the daughter of Hungarian immigrants, surrounded by poverty, discrimination, and a life that, for most, was doomed to be small. While other girls dreamed of balls, dresses, and happy endings, Estée looked at her own hands and saw something more. She saw possibilities. Even without fully understanding it, she knew, deep down, that she was destined for something bigger, something the world couldn't even imagine. Since childhood, she'd watched her mother care for her skin with homemade creams, simple, almost magical blends. Meanwhile, her uncle, a mad scientist, concocted strange potions, fragrances, and ointments in a makeshift lab in the back of their home. It was there, between glass jars, essences, and bubbling pots, that the first thread of her destiny began to unravel. This wasn't just a pastime, it was alchemy, and she could feel it pulsing inside her. But reality doesn't forgive dreamers. Her family fought just to survive, and no one seemed to have time to believe in fantasies. Being a woman, the daughter of immigrants, poor, all of that weighed on her shoulders like a silent sentence. To the world's eyes, she was destined to be invisible, just another face in the crowd, but not in her own eyes. Inside, Estée burned a flame, a permanent discomfort, a violent refusal to accept that this was her fate. While everyone around her learned to settle, she did the exact opposite. She observed, absorbed, learned. Every formula from her uncle, every scent, every texture, every reaction on the skin of anyone who tried their concoctions. She took mental notes, trained her hands, sharpened her senses. But more than anything, she trained her mind, not to give in, not to accept the limits life imposed on women like her. When she realized she could turn those formulas into something people wanted, something women actually needed, not just to look beautiful, but to feel powerful, her obsession began to take shape. It was no longer about creams. It was about self-esteem, about transformation, about daring to challenge the world with a jar in her hands. She swore to herself that nothing, absolutely nothing, would stand between her and that destiny. But the world doesn't bow to the dreams of a stubborn, poor woman. Every step felt like a minefield. Doubt was constant, misogyny suffocating, and fear always there. But Estée learned early that fear can't be erased. It can only be ignored. And that's exactly what she did. With nails, teeth, and a determination bordering on madness, she took her first step toward the impossible. The world looked at her and saw a stubborn woman, delusional, too ambitious for her own good. But behind that polite smile was a sharp, relentless mind that turned rejection into fuel. Estée realized early on that no one would give her space. She'd have to take it. And if necessary, she'd claw for every inch, even if it cost her everything. She started from zero. No store, no capital, no support. She carried her own products in cloth bags, going door to door, facing looks of disdain, salesmen laughing behind her back, managers who wouldn't even receive her. Every no cut like a blade. But instead of bleeding, she grew tougher. Failure was simply not allowed to stick around her. Rejection was daily. Doors slammed. People treated her like she was invisible. A woman selling homemade creams? Almost a joke. What they didn't know was that every no sparked a silent fury inside her. A fury that didn't destroy, it built. She wasn't just building a business, but a legend. A private war where there was only one rule: she would not lose. Estée developed a strategy that, for her time, sounded insane. If stores didn't want to sell her products, she'd make women want them so badly, stores would have no choice but to give in. She started handing out free samples, a revolutionary, risky idea, betting everything on the belief that once a woman tried her creams, she'd never want to live without them. While the market saw her actions as desperation, she saw them as weapons. She hit up beauty salons, hotel lobbies, department store entrances, offering, insisting, pressing. Slowly, the impossible started to give way. Customer by customer, face by face, her name began to spread, a powerful whisper among women who, like her, were tired of being ignored. But this first taste of victory came with scars. The exhaustion was brutal. The humiliations, constant. She'd go days without eating properly, without sleeping, running everywhere, carrying bags, climbing stairs, waiting hours for someone who often never even showed up. Every night brought the same silent question: how much longer? And every morning she answered, as long as it takes, until the world gives in. Estée wasn't selling creams. She was selling dreams, promising women something no one else dared offer: control over their own image. In a world ruled by men, where women were taught to stay quiet, look down, and accept, she appeared as a threat. A woman empowering others, not with speeches, but with bottles of hope. And that was too dangerous to ignore. She understood something the market giants missed. Beauty wasn't vanity, it was survival, it was power. So she treated every product as a work of art, every package as a trophy, every formula as a sacred secret. She personally demonstrated results, applying creams with delicate gestures, but the confidence of someone who knows she's building an empire, one face at a time. Aesthetics became a weapon. She reinvented how beauty products were sold, creating the concept of personalized service. Nobody did what she did. While others hid behind counters, she came up to you, touched your skin, looked you in the eyes and said, "You deserve this." In that moment, it wasn't just a sale, it was a pact, a liberation. But her success started to make people uncomfortable. The business world, dominated by men, began to see her as an aberration. A woman, without male partners, gaining ground, stealing prime displays from the big brands? Unthinkable. They tried to boycott her, ridicule her, even threaten her. But she'd lived long enough in the shadows to know how to walk in the dark. And if the price of success was isolation, so be it. She'd been alone before. Every attack made her more precise. Estée began to study the female psyche as a battlefield. She knew what women wanted before they did. She introduced the idea of beauty as a necessity, created campaigns mixing luxury with accessibility. And when she launched perfumes, she wasn't selling fragrance, she was selling promises, memories, fantasies in a bottle. She understood the game. More than that, she created her own rules. While the traditional brands tried to challenge her, she was already 3 steps ahead. She didn't just want to sell products, she wanted to redefine the industry. And at that moment, the world was starting to realize a woman, alone, determined, and furious, could be the most dangerous force in capitalism. For most, success looks like a prize. For Estée, it was also a curse. With every rung she climbed, the weight on her shoulders grew. Competitors tried to suffocate her. The doors that had opened started closing again, but now in subtler, crueler ways. Hidden boycotts, broken contracts, suppliers vanishing overnight. The system couldn't stand the idea of a woman breaking its rules. She discovered the corporate world wasn't just an arena for negotiation, it was a minefield. And often, the blow didn't come head-on. It came from behind. Friends became enemies. Allies turned out to be traitors. Every meeting was psychological warfare. Every smile hit a knife. And her? She learned to smile back, pretending not to notice, while sharpening her own blades. Exhaustion started to take its toll. She barely saw her son, barely slept. Her health began to crack. But every time her body threatened to quit, her mind reminded her she wasn't there just for money. She was there for something much bigger, to prove a woman could build an empire from nothing, that nobody else would ever have to ask for permission to exist, to dream, or to lead. While the giants played with numbers and shareholders, Estée played with something none of them understood: human connection. She looked her clients in the eye, knew their names, their pains, their dreams, understood that for those women, beauty wasn't frivolity, it was identity. That was something no money could buy, but she knew how to deliver. But for every victory, a loss. For every applause, an uncomfortable silence at home. Loneliness became her companion. She realized that the more she won, the further she drifted from everything and everyone. It was as if, to conquer the world, she had to sacrifice pieces of herself. And even with her heart heavy, she accepted it. Because quitting was never an option. The world tested her daily, and every day she answered the same way. She woke up earlier, worked harder, fought back stronger, because at the end of the day she'd learned a harsh, non-negotiable truth. Either you break the limits or they break you. Estée had achieved what once seemed impossible. Her products occupied spaces once denied to women. Her name began to be spoken in places where no woman had ever sat at the table before. But recognition came poisoned. She saw, with brutal clarity, that the world didn't know how to deal with a powerful woman unless she bowed her head, and she refused. The attacks changed form. No longer just simple boycotts, but rumors, lies whispered in meetings. They called her difficult, arrogant, obsessed, a complicated woman, the kind of label the world always uses to try to shrink women who dare to be bigger than what's expected of them. But every time they tried to diminish her, she grew, because she no longer knew how to be small. There were moments when she thought of stopping. The toll wasn't just physical, it was existential. She'd look in the mirror and wonder if there was anything left of who she was before all of this. But whenever doubt crept in, she remembered where she came from. And a truth she never forgot. Those who are born invisible learn to be impossible to ignore. She didn't wear armor. She didn't need to. Her resilience was in her skin, in her obsession with details, in her relentless pursuit of excellence. Every cream, every perfume, every lipstick carried her invisible signature. Because she knew in the end, the product wasn't just a cosmetic, it was an extension of her own fight. But as the empire grew, new ghosts appeared. Partners wanted to take over. Advisors tried to convince her to tone down, to settle for less, to just be the pretty face on a company run by men. But they forgot who she was. Estée wasn't born to be a symbol. She was born to be the boss. That's when she did the unthinkable, doubled down, expanded further, entered markets everyone called impossible, broke models, reinvented categories, ignored every unwritten rule about how far a woman could go. At that moment, it wasn't just about selling beauty. It was about leaving a scar on history, a mark no one would ever forget. The bigger Estée got, the more the world tried to remind her of the place she was supposed to occupy. Boardrooms were cold, dominated by stares that refused to see her as an equal. Suited men underestimated her, treated her like a stubborn woman playing entrepreneur. What they didn't know was that she wasn't playing. She was building an empire that would make their names look small. She understood better than most that just being a woman in that world was an act of rebellion. Every contract signed was a punch in the face of misogyny, Every new store, a shout of resistance. Every product launched, a declaration of war on a system that tried to remind her, constantly, she didn't belong there. But some days, even she doubted. When betrayals came from where she least expected, when buyout offers arrived disguised as compliments but loaded with intent to control, they'd say, "Be our partner. Let us handle the hard part. Relax." But she knew what that meant. It was just a fancier way of saying, "Sit down, smile, stay in your place." And she refused. Once, twice, 10 times. Because Estée didn't build to sell. She built to last. To prove that a woman doesn't need to give in, stay quiet, or hide behind a man's name. She could and would be the name. The threats evolved. Legal, political, veiled. Some suppliers cut ties. Magazines, coincidentally, stopped covering her brand. Industry giants teamed up to block her from certain markets. But she was raised in scarcity, bred in discomfort. And anyone born on the margins knows how to turn lack into ammunition. If the world thought it could suffocate her, it made the same mistake everyone makes when they underestimate a woman who learned to survive in silence. Estée wasn't just a businesswoman. She was an earthquake. And every move made against her only made her stronger, more violent, and absolutely impossible to ignore. When people looked at her, they'd still whisper, "She's just lucky. It's just a phase. She's going to break." The whole industry bet on her silent failure. After all, who did she think she was? A woman, daughter of immigrants, no corporate pedigree, daring to challenge century-old beauty dynasties? What they didn't get was that Estée wasn't in the game to participate. She was in it to win. While the giants relied on cold formulas, she mastered the art they ignored: eye contact, knowing what every woman truly wanted, what the male-dominated world didn't even know how to ask. She understood before anyone else that beauty wasn't vanity, it was freedom. She built her products to deliver more than cosmetics. She delivered self-esteem, power, belonging. She wasn't just selling creams, she was selling transformation. She did in-store demos herself, applied her own products to customers' faces, touched, conversed, made it personal. While competitors saw women as numbers, she treated them as queens, and that no MBA, no boardroom could ever copy. But the pressure never let up. The bigger she got, the more lawsuits, boycotts, hit pieces, and backstage sabotage piled on. It was like the universe tried to remind her every day, "You shouldn't be here." But every hit was fuel. Because once you've been invisible, you learn no one else's silence will ever be louder than your own voice. There were nights she barely slept. Anxiety stalked her like a predator. Fear was constant, the risk enormous. But she looked back and knew. She'd come too far to turn back. What started as an idea was now a revolution disguised as a business. And neither she nor anyone else could stop it anymore. Then the signs became clear. Sales exploded. Lines formed. The women who were once ignored now became the foundation of an empire born not from privilege, but from resistance. An empire nobody believed in. An empire that bore one name. And that name was Estée Lauder. What began as scorn quickly turned into discomfort, then into outright hate. Estée's success exposed, without her having to say a word, the incompetence of everyone who swore she'd never make it. For every store she opened, a new enemy emerged. For every sold-out product, a new trap was laid. The industry giants, once indifferent, now saw her as a real threat. Lawsuits started flying. False claims, internal sabotage, secret deals to strangle suppliers and pressure distributors. All in the shadows, because it's easier to try to kill a woman in the dark than to face her in the light. But they missed something crucial. Estée had been forged in the dark. Hunger, rejection, contempt. She'd known those faces since childhood. Every attempt to suffocate her only reignited the spark inside her, and that spark now was fire. A fire that couldn't be put out. She learned that when a woman succeeds, it's treated like a crime. That being too bold, too big, too free was enough to upset anyone who'd always been comfortable in their own privilege. But she wasn't here to make anyone comfortable. She was here to kick doors down, and if they didn't open, she'd smash them. The invitations for friendly negotiations arrived, always disguised as concern. "Estée, let us buy you out. It's for your own good. Competing is just too hard for you." She'd smile, knowing the truth. What they were really saying was, "You've won," and that terrifies us. And when fear switches sides, the game is never the same again. That's when she realized she wasn't building a business anymore. She was building a legend, a scar in history. And it didn't matter how many times they tried to bury her. She'd already learned the most brutal and liberating rule of all. When you're made of iron, you don't fear the fire. The world saw glamour, the gold bottles, the lit-up storefronts, the magazine covers. But few imagined the real price Estée paid every day. Behind every victory were sleepless nights, hidden pain, crises stifled in silence. For her, winning was never just about money. It was about proving, first to herself, then to the world, that she would never be invisible again. People pointed, admired, envied. But nobody saw her break down alone in the office, head in her hands, staring at the wall like she was facing her own limit. Sometimes, the weight was unbearable. There was no manual, no safety net. Just her against everything. And still, she kept going. Betrayals came from where she least expected. People she'd helped, lifted up, turned into partners, suddenly turned against her, driven by greed. They tried to convince her to give up, to sell, to quit. But they didn't understand. For someone who's had everything denied, quitting isn't even an option. She knew she couldn't make mistakes. She didn't have the luxury of failure. A man fails. He starts over. A woman fails. She's silenced, erased, turned into a joke. That's why every move she made was calculated to the millimeter. Every step a declaration. Not only did she deserve to be there, she owned that space. But the price wasn't just professional. It was personal. She watched relationships crumble, lost people along the way, lost pieces of herself that would never be recovered. Because being Estée Lauder wasn't just a name, it was a sentence, a responsibility that was never light, but she wore it like a crown of iron and scars. And even in the darkest days, there was a certainty that never left her. If she didn't do it, no one would. And if she fell, she'd fall fighting, with her name carved into history, with her hands dirty from battle, and with the clear conscience that she never gave in. Never. Estée Lauder's rise didn't come with easy glory. As she built her empire, she became lonelier than ever. Power pushed allies away, sparked envy, built invisible walls. She learned early. For those who break paradigms, there's no room for public weakness. So she kept her silence as a shield and her pain locked tight. The loneliness of leadership ate her up inside. At parties, she was the most admired woman, and at the same time, the most misunderstood. Most people couldn't see the real woman behind the success, just the public figure, unbreakable, unshakable. But the price of carrying the world on your shoulders is way too high, and Estée paid with nights of anguish and deep doubts. No achievement could compensate for the feeling of always fighting the invisible. The corporate world, still run by men, insisted on treating her as an intruder. Advice was given in patronizing tones, her decisions questioned, her strategies doubted. But she'd already learned to stand on her own. Loneliness was her throne. And on that throne, she was absolute queen. Even with all that, Estée never lost her humanity. The empathy she had for ordinary women kept her connected to her mission. She knew what she did went far beyond profit. It was a daily battle to prove that female success wasn't a threat, but a revolution. And that real beauty was in the power to be who you truly are, without asking for permission. Behind the curtain of success was a woman with fear, with wounds, with dreams and doubts. But there was also a warrior who refused to yield, who faced each day as if it were the final round in a never-ending fight. The loneliness of the throne was a heavy burden. But that was the price for building an empire out of nothing, and out of herself. And so, even in solitude, Estée Lauder made it clear that no woman who refuses to be erased will ever be without light. Her empire was living proof that, even in isolation, an unstoppable force can emerge and change the game forever. While the world knew the name Estée Lauder, few realized how much she sacrificed to build her legacy. What looked like glamour hid daily battles against exhaustion, doubt, and the fear of failure. Her personal life was often left behind, erased to make space for an empire that is now a global reference. She never wanted to simply create a cosmetics brand. She wanted something that would transcend generations, a legacy that would inspire women to rise up, challenge the system, and believe in their own worth. And she pulled it off, with a rare combination of vision, boldness, and a determination that felt unbreakable. But the price of that legacy was steep. Health, personal relationships, moments of simple happiness, these were often pushed aside. What nobody saw was that behind the image of success was a tired woman who missed connection, true love, and peace. But she never said it out loud. Estée knew her mission was bigger than herself. Her name would be carried not just on bottles and packaging, but in the silent inspiration of millions of women around the world. And that was enough to keep her going, even when her body and mind begged for rest. Today, her legacy is visible on every shelf, in every face that smiles in the mirror and feels powerful. But above all, it's an eternal reminder that real success isn't about luck. It's about relentless struggle, often invisible, full of pain, courage, and hope. Decades after its founding, Estée Lauder's empire continues to grow, becoming one of the most powerful forces in the global beauty market. Under the Estée Lauder Company's banner, the group includes an impressive lineup of iconic brands, luxury to affordable, touching diverse audiences worldwide. Among the most famous brands under her control, MAC, Clinique, Bobbi Brown, La Mer, Jo Malone, and Aveda, each one carrying the legacy of boldness and innovation Estée planted from the start. This diversity reflects the vision of a woman who understood that beauty is multifaceted, just like the women who use it. The group now operates in over 150 countries, with billion-dollar revenues testifying to the tireless work of Estée and her successors. The commitment to quality, innovation, and especially emotional connection with women remains the heartbeat of the company. But the empire isn't just commercial. The Estée Lauder companies are also known for their social engagement, investing in causes like breast cancer awareness, reinforcing the brand as one that gives back to the community that supports it. The name Estée Lauder has transcended the market, becoming a symbol of resilience, courage, and female power. And even decades later, her story continues to inspire anyone facing the daily struggle to be big in a world that prefers women small. So, the woman who sold dreams and never gave up built more than a brand. She sparked a revolution that's still alive, touching generations and redefining what success means for women everywhere. If Estée's story moved you and you believe in the power of impossible dreams, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and share this video with someone who needs inspiration today. Join us to discover the stories behind the greatest legends and prove that nothing and no one can stop a woman determined to change her destiny.